The road to Greyhaven was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that pressed against the glass and made every sound inside the truck feel louder than it should. The hum of the old engine, the rattle of loose tools in the back, and the steady breathing of the German shepherd in the passenger seat all blended into a rhythm that Ethan Cole had learned to find comfort in. Ranger's ears twitched at every passing shadow. He sat alert, gaze fixed forward, as if he understood they were driving toward something that couldn't be undone. Greyhaven appeared just as the fog began to thicken, a small coastal town tucked between the cliffs and the sea, half forgotten by time. The salt air rolled in waves over the cracked asphalt, and the neon sign that once welcomed travelers now flickered with only 2 letters still alive, H-N. Ethan slowed the truck as they entered Main Street. Most of the shops were shuttered, windows boarded, for sale signs leaned crookedly against faded walls. The few lights that did glow came from a diner at the corner and an old gas station with its pumps long rusted over. He rolled down the window, letting the cool air in. Not exactly what the ad promised, but, he muttered. Ranger responded with a low chuff, the kind that said he agreed but wasn't going to complain. They drove until the pavement gave way to gravel, and the forest began to close in on both sides. There, tucked away behind overgrown ferns and moss-covered stones, was the house, the one Ethan had bought online for less than a used pickup. It wasn't much, a cabin built decades ago, its roof sagging slightly, paint peeling off in long, tied strips. The porch steps creaked under his boots as he climbed up, the boards soft with moisture, but when he turned the knob and pushed the door open, the air inside smelled like cedar and dust, not rot. That was something. He dropped his duffel by the door, took a slow look around. The living room was small but had a brick fireplace, a window facing the woods, and a shelf that someone had left behind with a single photograph, a man standing by a boat, smiling. The name Greyhaven Docks, 1984 was etched on the frame. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of waves crashing somewhere beyond the trees. For the first time in a long while, Ethan let himself breathe. He'd left behind years of noise, sand, heat, the sharp whistle of bullets and the endless buzz of orders barked over radios. Here, it was different. Here, the silence didn't threaten him, it simply waited. The next few hours were a blur of unpacking. Ranger sniffed every corner, marked his new territory, and finally curled up by the fireplace, where Ethan laid out an old blanket from their Marine days. When the generator kicked on, a dull hum filled the house. A single bulb flickered to life above the kitchen sink. The light felt almost too bright for the quiet. Ethan opened a beer, stepped outside onto the porch, and watched as the fog thickened along the tree line. Somewhere far off, a bell rang, maybe from the harbor. It echoed once, then faded. That's when he saw it, a man standing by the end of the dirt road, half hidden by mist. The stranger watched the cabin for a few seconds before turning and disappearing into the trees. Ranger lifted his head, ears forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Yep," Ethan said forwardly. "I saw him too. He didn't chase after. There was no reason to. Not yet." The next morning, he walked into town. The diner was open, smelling of burnt coffee and bacon grease. A handful of locals sat at the counter, their eyes following him as he entered, not unkindly, but with that small-town curiosity reserved for newcomers who don't quite fit. The waitress poured him a cup before he even asked. "You must be the guy who bought the McAllister place," she said, pen tapping against her notepad. "Guess that's me," Ethan replied. "Ethan Cole," she nodded. "Name's Ruth. Been empty since, well, a long time." Ethan caught the pause but didn't press. "I'm just looking to fix it up. Keep to myself. That's probably for the best," she said, half smiling. "Not much left to fix around here anyway. Vance Development bought up half the town. Folks who stayed either work for them or wish they didn't. Vance Development." She nodded toward the window. Across the street, a glossy black SUV rolled past, new, out of place against the peeling paint and broken sidewalks. Its logo gleamed on the door, a stylized V. "They've been buying land fast," Ruth said quietly. "Say they're gonna build a resort or something. But it's been 2 years, and all they've done is clear out folks." Ethan looked out the window as the SUV turned toward the coast road. "Guess I'll try not to get in their way." Ruth refilled his cup. "If you're lucky, they won't get in yours." By the time he left the diner, the sky had darkened again. A storm was moving in from the sea, and the streets glistened with the first hints of rain. He started the truck, the engine coughing before it settled into a steady growl. As he drove back toward the cabin, he passed a narrow street lined with faded signs, a mechanic's shop, a hardware store, all closed. Only one place still had its lights on, Harbor Vet Clinic. Ethan slowed down. eyes catching on the warm glow through the window. Inside he could see a woman in scrubs, gently wrapping a bandage around a small dog's paw. Something about that light, steady, golden felt out of place in Greyhaven, alive somehow. He drove on, back into the fog, with Ranger's head resting on the window ledge and the sound of the rain starting to drum against the roof. Tomorrow, he'd start fixing the porch, maybe clear the brush around the well, maybe meet whoever ran that vet clinic. But tonight, it was enough to sit by the fire, with Ranger asleep at his feet and the storm whispering against the glass. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel like he was running from something. He was just waiting, though he didn't yet know what for. Morning came, wrapped in fog again, the kind that blurred the edges of the trees and made every sound feel close, like the forest was breathing with you. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, mug in hand, and watched Ranger limp down the steps toward the truck. The old dog's right hind leg dragged slightly, the same leg that had taken shrapnel years ago. It was healed long ago, but the cold always brought it back. Yeah, Ethan murmured. Looks like we're paying that vet a visit after all. The Harbor Vet Clinic sat near the water. A single-story building painted white once, but now faded by salt and wind. The parking lot was empty except for an old blue pickup and a small SUV with mud up to its doors. Ethan parked, helped Ranger down, and pushed through the door. A small bell chimed overhead. Inside smelled like antiseptic cedar shavings, and something faintly floral. A radio hummed softly from the back room. Then came the sound of boots, quick, sure steps on tile. Dr. Leah Morgan appeared from behind a curtain, wiping her hands with a cloth. She was in her mid-30s, hair tied back, eyes sharp and steady in a way that made most people stand up straighter without realizing it. "Morning," she said. "What happened here?" "Old injury," Ethan replied. "Flared up again last night." She crouched, running a practiced hand along Ranger's leg. The dog stood still, eyes on her, tail flicking once in approval. "You're a good boy," she murmured, almost to himself. "You've seen some things, haven't you?" Ranger huffed, as if answering. She glanced up at Ethan. "Marine dog." He hesitated. "Yeah, we both were, thought so," she said quietly. "You've got that look." He didn't ask what look. He'd heard it before in airports, in hospitals, from people who thought war left a mark only on skin. Leah worked in silence for a few minutes, cleaning the wound and wrapping it in a neat bandage. Her movements were careful but firm, the kind of touch that came from someone who'd learned to fix things without making a fuss. "You're new in town," she said finally. "McAllister Place. That obvious." She smiled faintly. "Everyone in Greyhaven knows everything or thinks they do. I'll try to stave off the rumor mill. Good luck with that." For a brief moment, the air between them softened, two strangers standing in the quiet rhythm of care and habit. But the sound of ties crunching gravel outside broke it. Leah's jaw tightened. "Of course," she muttered. The clinic door opened, and the fog rolled in with a man who stepped through. He wore a tailored jacket, shoes to clean for a town like this, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Down to Morgan," he said, voice smooth as glass. "Always working. Admirable." Ethan didn't move, but his stance shifted subtle, the kind of awareness that never really left him. Leah straightened. "What do you want, Dylan?" The man gave a polite laugh. "Just checking in. The company's making progress on the waterfront project. Thought you'd be thrilled to hear." "You mean the one that'll bulldoze half of Harbor Street?" He shrugged. "Progress always looks messy before it's beautiful." His eyes flicked toward Ethan, assessing. "And who's this?" "One of your new clients. Just passing through," Ethan said evenly. "Ah." Dylan smiled wider. "You'll find Greyhaven's a place full of opportunities if you talk to the right people." Leah folded her arms. "He's talking to the right person right now, and she's busy." Dylan ignored her. "You know, Doc, the company's still willing to make you an offer, double what your clinic's worth. You could move inland, open somewhere better, somewhere that doesn't reek of salt and lost causes." Leah's voice went flat. "This clinic was my father's. It stays." The man's smile thinned. "Sentiment is a dangerous thing, Leah. Greyhaven will change whether you want it to or not." Something in the way he said it made Ranger's ears perk. The dog took a single step forward, low growl humming in his throat. Dylan's gaze flicked down. "Charming pet." Ethan's tone came out colder than he intended. "He doesn't bite unless you deserve it." The silence that followed was heavy, sharp around the edges. Dylan studied him, then turned back to Leah. "Think about it. The offer won't stay on the table forever." He left as smoothly as he'd arrived. The sound of his car fading into the fog, Leah exhaled, shoulders loosening. "Sorry you had to see that. I've seen worse," Ethan said. She gave a small laugh, not from humor, but exhaustion. "Yeah, haven't we all?" Ranger nudged her leg gently, burning a smile. He's fine now, she said, patting his head. Keep him warm for a few days. Bring him back if it flares up again. Ethan nodded, reaching for his wallet. How much do I owe you? First, visits on the house, Leah said. Consider it a welcome to Greyhaven. He hesitated at the door. You always this generous? Only to people who don't work for Vance. He smiled, the first real one in days. Good to know. Outside, the mist had thickened, wrapping the town in soft gray. Ethan loaded Ranger into the truck, then glanced back at the clinic's glowing window. Leah stood inside, watching him go, arms crossed but eyes distant like someone standing guard over something she couldn't yet explain. As the truck pulled away, Ethan felt that familiar itch in his gut, the sense that something was building beneath the surface. He'd learned to trust that feeling. It had saved him more times than luck ever did. The town might have looked quiet, almost dead, but he could tell Greyhaven was hiding something. And sooner or later he was going to find out what. Greyhaven woke to rain that morning, a thin, steady drizzle that blurred the outlines of things. The harbor smelled of iron and wet wood, the streets slick and quiet. Leah Morgan was already at the clinic before sunrise. She'd been cleaning kennels, sorting medicine orders, pretending not to think about Dylan Vance. But the name stayed like rust under paint. You couldn't scrub it off. Ethan arrived mid-morning with the Ranger trotting beside him, a towel slung over his shoulder and a quiet nod as greeting. Just checking his leg, he said, still tender. Leah smiled faintly. Guess that means he's got a reason to visit. It was one of those easy moments, brief, ordinary, and good. She was about to reach for the stethoscope when the bell over the front door chimed again. The sound changed the air. Dylan Vance walked in without knocking. Umbrella dripping on the tile, his clothes looked out of place here, expensive, tailored, dry-cleaned arrogance. Dr. Morgan, he said smoothly. We need to talk. Leah straightened. This isn't a good time. Dylan, he took a slow step forward, eyes sharp and smile gone. You've had weeks to think about our offer. My father's patience is running out. This is a veterinary clinic, Leah said, her voice steady. If you want to make threats, try City Hall. Dylan's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. The land under your feet will belong to Vance Development, whether you like it or not. You can either sell or be forced out. Your choice decides how painful it gets. From across the room, Ethan's head lifted slightly. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Leah folded her arms. Then I guess we're done here. Dylan stepped closer. We're not done until you sign. Ranger barked once. Sharp, the kind of bark that carried a warning. Dylan startled, then sneered. Get that mutt away from me. He's fine, Ethan said quietly. But Dylan wasn't listening, his face twisted with the kind of anger that came from never being told no. He kicked out fast, vicious as shoe, connecting hard with Ranger's ribs. The sound, that sharp yelp of pain, cut through the room like glass breaking underwater. Leah gasped, "Hey, what the hell?" But Ethan was already moving. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It was precise, the kind of violence built from muscle memory, from thousand drills in places that didn't exist on maps. He closed the distance in 2 steps, caught Dylan's wrist mid-air, twisted it up and back. A second later, Dylan's knee buckled, shoulder locked. The sound of cartilage strained under pressure. Ethan's voice was calm, almost quiet. Don't. Dylan tried to jerk free. You're assaulting me. Ethan tightened his grip just enough to make him drop to one knee. No, he said. I'm stopping you. Then he let go. Dylan stumbled back, gasping, clutching his arm. Next time, Ethan said, voice low and steady, I won't just talk. For a moment, the only sound was rain ticking against the windows and Ranger's labored breathing. Leah knelt beside the dog, checking his ribs, whispering something soft under her breath. Ranger licked her wrist as if to say he was fine, but her hands were trembling. Dylan backed toward the door, red-faced eyes darting between them. You'll regret this. He spat. Both of you. He stormed out into the rain, phone already to his ear. The black SUV waiting at the curb swallowed him up. Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. Like the calm after a shot fired. Leah stood slowly. You didn't have to do that, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. Ethan looked at her, rain dripping from his jacket. He kicked your dog. Her eyes met his confusion, anger, gratitude, all tangled together. You could have broken his arm. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I could have. For a while, neither spoke. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the rain seeping in through the doorway. Ethan crouched next to Ranger, running a hand down his side. You're all right, boy, he murmured. Tough as always. Ranger leaned into the touch, tail thumping weakly. Leah finally exhaled. He's not going to let this go. The Vances, they don't lose. Ethan straightened, eyes narrowing. Then they shouldn't have started something they can't finish. There was no threat in his voice, just a fact. Plain and cold. Leah stared at him, seeing something she hadn't before, not just a quiet man with a dog, but someone who carried a different kind of silence, the kind that comes after explosions. He picked up Ranger's leash. I'll keep him calm for a few days. Thanks, Doc. She nodded, still processing. Ethan, he paused at the door. Be careful, she said. He gave a small nod and stepped out into the rain. The sky had gone gray again. The kind of gray that flattened everything. Ethan stood on the porch of his cabin later that night, the roof dripping slow and steady. Ranger lay beside him, ribs bandaged, breathing even. Ethan ran a hand over the dog's head. Rough, but gentle. Guess we're in it again, huh, partner? He said. Ranger lifted his head, eyes steady, as if to answer. Ethan looked out at the dark tree line, rain whispering against the leaves. Yeah, he said softly. We just started trouble in a town that doesn't know what's coming. The ocean roared somewhere beyond the fog, and Greyhaven held its breath. Rain had turned to mist by morning, a soft gray blanket draped over gray. The town looked peaceful from the outside. Gulls circling the harbor, coffee steam rising from the diner, boats rocking gently in their slips. But peace, Ethan knew, was often just the quiet before someone kicked in the door. He found Leah at the back of the clinic, hunched over a stack of paperwork and a half-empty mug of coffee gone cold. Ranger lay on the floor beside her, half asleep, tail occasionally thumping when she turned a page. You look like someone who hasn't slept, Ethan said. Leah glanced up, eyes ringed with fatigue. Between invoices, citations, and fake inspections, I'm starting to think sleep's overrated. He frowned. Fake inspections. She exhaled and pushed a folder across the table. Animal control, health department, building safety. They've all been here or claimed to be. Different badges, different agencies. Same outcome. Fines, shutdown notices, missing paperwork that I've already submitted. Ethan flipped through the pages, everyone stamped, signed, official looking, but he noticed the inconsistencies immediately. Fonts off by half a size, signatures mismatched, dates overlapping. Been happening long? He asked. For months, she said. Started right after I turned down the first offer from Vance Development. The others in town, the diner, the shipyard, the bait shop, they all sold after this started happening to them. I thought it was bad luck. But she looked at him, voice lower now. Then yesterday happened. Dylan doesn't make threats for fun. Ethan leaned back, jaw tightening. It's not bad luck. It's a siege. A what? A tactic, he said. Used overseas. You don't take a town by storm, you choke it, cut off supplies, shut down systems, make life unlivable until surrender looks like salvation. Leah stared at him. You think that's what this is? He nodded slowly. Different battlefield. The same playbook. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the clinic's fridge the only sound between them. Outside, fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Finally, Ethan spoke again. I looked into the Vance name last night. Didn't lack what I found. Leah raised an eyebrow. You looked into them. Couldn't sleep, he said simply. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small drive, setting it on the table like evidence. Charles Vance, the man behind the company, he's not who he says he is. Real name's Konstantin Volkov, Russian. Used to run arms shipments through the Balkans back in the 90s. Disappeared around 2004 after a federal sting. Leah blinked. That's impossible. The Vances have been in Washington for decades. On paper, Ethan said, Volkov used offshore fronts to build the company, rebranded under a dead partner's name. His son Dylan was born in Cyprus, came here when Volkov retired. Leah shook her head. You can't just assume because you found something online. Ethan interrupted her gently. It's not from online. It's from a secure database. He turned the laptop toward her. Rows of company registries filled the screen. Shell corporations, trade routes, bank transfers leading back to a single holding firm in Montenegro. Leah's face went pale as she scrolled. He owns everything through these dummy companies. Every inch of this coastline, Ethan said. And he's not building a resort. He's buying a route. Route for what? Ethan's eyes were hard now. For whatever. He's still moving guns, tech, maybe worse. The docks here are deep enough for cargo, quiet enough to disappear things, and no one questions a luxury developer shipping construction equipment. She sank into the chair. God, welcome to the new kind of war, Ethan muttered. No uniforms, no flags, just men with clean hands and dirty ledgers. Leah rubbed her temples. If this is real, if what you're saying is true, we need to go to the authorities. Ethan gave a bitter half-smile. You mean the same authorities who signed those fake citations? The sheriff's on Vance's payroll. I checked his offshore account this morning. He's been taking quiet deposits through a Cayman front for 6 years. She looked at him sharply. You checked his account? He shrugged. Old habits. Leah leaned back, trying to absorb it all. So what now? You're just going to take on a corporation? It didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the fog thicken over the water. I came here to disappear, he said quietly. Didn't work out that way. You don't have to fix this, she said softly. It's not your fight. Ethan turned toward her, expression unreadable. It became my fight the second he kicked my dog. That made her laugh, tired but genuine. You're serious? Dead serious. He packed up the laptop and the drive, tucking them into his jacket. I'll need a few days. And a secure line. Leah frowned. Why? Because I'm not doing this alone. That night, the town slept uneasy. Lights flickered along the dockside where half-built scaffolds groaned in the wind. Somewhere offshore, the low rumble of a cargo ship echoed through the mist to large. Too late for any legitimate trade. Ethan sat at the small kitchen table of his cabin, the glow of his laptop painting his face in blue light. Ranger lay by the door, eyes open, as if he knew something was shifting. Ethan scrolled through encrypted files, cross-referencing shipping manifests, black market dealers, and old mission reports. Each piece lined up perfectly like someone had built an empire from the ashes of war. He exhaled slowly, reached for a small black phone buried in his duffel, and powered it on. It took a moment for the signal to connect, long enough for him to reconsider. But then he heard it, a faint click, followed by a familiar voice filtered through static. Echo team. This is Ghost. You copy. A pause, then a rough, familiar chuckle. Ghost. Hell, I thought you were buried in paperwork somewhere. What's the job? Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes cold and focused. Greyhaven, he said. We've got a situation. A dirty developer named Vance, real name arms laundering through civilian fronts. I'll send coordinates. Copy that. You want backup? Yeah, Ethan said, glancing down at Ranger.
It's time to work again. He ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, the fog pressing against the windows like the world was holding its breath. Ranger shifted, resting his head on Ethan's boot. Ethan looked down at him and nodded once. Echo team's coming in. Partner, looks like the war followed us home.
Morning light bled through the fog like a weak promise. The town of Greyhaven was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday. Even the gulls seemed to keep their distance. Ethan felt it before he knew it, that shift in the air. The silence before something breaks. When the knock came, it wasn't gentle. He opened the cabin door to find Sheriff Holt standing there, broad-red, a man who looked uncomfortable in both his uniform and his conscience behind him. Two deputies waited with tranquilizer rifles half hidden against their legs. Morning, Holt, Ethan said evenly. You bring coffee or trouble? The sheriff didn't smile. Ethan, you know why I'm here. I don't, Ethan said. But I've got a feeling you're about to lie to me. Holt sighed, taking off his hat. There's been a report, a video showing your dog attacking a civilian last night. Woman named Eleanor Pierce filed it, corporate PR for Vance Development. Says Ranger came after her assistant near the docks. Ethan's jaw flexed. You've seen this video. I have. Holt said. It's bad, son. Your dog looks mean, blood on the guy's arm. Screaming. It's all there. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, eyes narrowing. You really believe that? Ranger hasn't left my sight in 3 days. Doesn't matter what I believe, Holt said quietly. The county ordinance does. I've got a signed order. The dog's to be quarantined at the shelter for 48 hours pending review. Ethan's voice was calm, but the stillness behind it was dangerous. And after 48 hours, Holt looked down. If no appeals filed, he's to be put down. The world went quiet, then, not the silence of peace, but the kind that rings in your ears after a grenade goes off. Leah was already there, stepping out from the side of the cabin where she'd been helping with Ranger's dressing. This is insane, she snapped. That video is fake, you know it. Holt, Ranger's a therapy-certified canine. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Tell that to the camera, Holt muttered. I don't like this any more than you do, but my hands are tied. Ethan stared at him a long time, then gave a slow nod. You want him alive? Then you better not pull that trigger on my property. I'll bring him in myself. Holt hesitated, then nodded. By noon, he said. No later. When the cruiser pulled away, Leah turned on Ethan. You're not really going to hand him over, are you? Ethan knelt beside Ranger, who pressed close to his side as if sensing every word. If I run, they'll call it proof of guilt. If I fight, he'll die faster. I need time. Leah folded her arms, angry and scared. Time for what? To find the truth, Ethan said, and to hit back. By noon, the shelter was a small fortress, chain-link fences, cameras, deputies posted like they were guarding a prison. Holt met Ethan out front, trying to avoid his eyes. Has to be done by the book, Holt said. Ethan clipped the leash to Ranger's collar, his hand steady even as his stomach twisted. Ranger didn't resist, just looked up, trusting, tail brushing against his boot. Easy, buddy, Ethan whispered. You've been through worse. When the deputies took the leash, Ranger gave a soft whine, the kind Ethan hadn't heard since their last mission overseas. It cut through him sharper than any bullet. Leah's eyes shone with tears. This isn't right, Ethan. You can't just let them. I know, he said quietly. That's why I won't. That Ethan. The story broke. Local news ran the footage of Ranger attacking a man near the docks, blurry, shaky, perfect for outrage. Eleanor Pierce stood before the cameras, her tone equal parts grief and righteous fury. She spoke about reckless ownership, community safety, and Vance's commitment to Greyhaven's future. The man in the video screamed, blood pouring down his sleeve. But Ethan knew what he was seeing. Wrong lighting, mismatched shadows. Ranger's gait reversed from an old rescue clip Leah had filmed last winter. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to damn him. By nightfall, the town had turned. Neighbors avoided eye contact. A woman pulled her kid away as Ethan passed. Leah followed him to the truck, voice low and urgent. We can't wait 2 days for some fake review, she said. They'll kill him the second the cameras stop rolling. Ethan said nothing, eyes fixed on the horizon. I went to the station, he finally said, asked to see the footage. They refused. It said it was corporate evidence. Meaning, Ethan said, it's locked somewhere Vance controls. Leah frowned. So what do you do? He looked at her calm, deliberate. What I do best. The night wrapped Greyhaven in fog again, thick as smoke. The town's streetlights glowed like dying embers. Ethan stood outside the shelter's back gate, dressed in black, a pair of leather gloves tucked into his belt. Every move was measured, every breath, quiet. He checked the watch on his wrist, the same one from the service. 200 hours, through the bars. He saw Ranger lying in the concrete cell, head resting on his paws. The dog's ears flicked at the faintest sound. When Ethan whispered his name, Ranger lifted his head, tail brushing the floor once. Silent and steady, Ethan crouched, resting a hand on the bars. His voice was barely a breath. Easy, boy, we're not done yet. He slipped on the gloves slow, deliberate, and reached for the lockpick set in his pocket. The motion felt familiar, automatic, like muscle memory from another life. For a moment, he hesitated. The line between soldier and fugitive had always been thin, but this wasn't war, not really. This was about loyalty, about keeping the only thing left in his world alive. He looked one last time at Ranger, who stayed perfectly still, eyes locked on his. Keep quiet, Ethan whispered. I'm getting you out of here. The rain came down in thin needling sheets, the kind that blurred the edges of everything. Greyhaven slept under its fog, unaware that justice was about to crawl through its underbelly. Ethan moved like a shadow along the alley behind the police station, dressed in black from neck to boots, face half hidden beneath his hood. The world had narrowed to breath and heartbeat slow, steady, measured. The Marine in him had taken over again. He found the old maintenance tunnel exactly where the blueprints had promised, under a rusted drainage grate behind the generator shed. It smelled of rust, oil, and time. He pried the grate open, slid inside, and vanished into the dark. The tunnel ran cold and low, barely wide enough to crawl through. Pipes hummed above him. Water dripped from somewhere deep in the concrete veins. Ethan's gloved hands traced the path by memory. Left turn, ladder, then 60 feet north to the service junction that opened beneath the evidence wing. He whispered to himself, voiced low and steady, just like old times. Inside the station, the night shift was light. 1 desk sergeant, 2 deputies, and Holt's old office light burning faintly through frosted glass. Ethan waited below the grate, timing their footsteps. When the hallway fell silent, he pushed it up an inch and slipped through like smoke. He didn't run. He didn't need to. Every move was deliberate. Down the corridor, past the empty booking room, toward the holding kennels that now served as quarantine. From behind the steel door came a low, familiar sound, a soft thump of tail against concrete. Ranger had heard him. Easy, boy, Ethan murmured, working the keypad. The code was basic to basic, small-town security. He whispered with a wry grin. A soft click, and the lock disengaged. Ranger stood, eyes bright in the dim red light. His ears twitched, but he didn't bark. He didn't need to. He simply pressed his head into Ethan's chest, breathing hard, trembling with pent-up energy. Good to see you too, Ethan whispered. We're getting out. Stay close. He clipped on the harness and reached into his pack to smoke canisters, 1 EMP puck, and a small flashlight taped red to avoid glare. He'd promised himself this wouldn't be a war, but if they were going to call him the enemy, he might as well play the part. He pulled the first pin. A dull pop echoed through the vents, followed by a hiss of gray smoke rolling low across the corridor. The alarm tripped 3 seconds later, predictable, mechanical, loud enough to mask every step he took. Motion in the West Wing. A deputy shouted. Ethan moved faster. He slipped through the haze, disarming one officer with a twist and shove that sent the man gasping but unhurt. Another swung a baton. Ethan caught it mid-air and pinned it to the wall. No harm, Ethan said quietly. You're just doing your job. But so am I. He dropped the baton, kicked open the side exit, and whistled once. Ranger bolted ahead, nose to the wind, leading him down the narrow alley toward the docks. Behind them, sirens rose through the fog distant, confused, too slow. By the time they reached the waterfront, the rain had turned heavy, hammering the tin roofs of the abandoned boat sheds. Ethan ducked into one, dragging the door closed behind him. The place smelled of salt and diesel, long forgotten. He knelt beside Ranger, running a hand over his coat. You okay? Ranger huffed softly, pressing close, tail low but steady. No limp, no injury, just loyalty. Always loyalty. Ethan sat back, breathing hard for the first time all night. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind the hollow ache of old memories, the kind that only show up when the mission's over and silence returns. He pulled off his gloves and found a sheet of paper in his pocket, the one he'd left taped to Sheriff Holt's office door before slipping out. 4 words written in his sharp, military hand. Justice comes with or without you. It was nearly dawn when the door creaked open again. Leah stood there, soaked through, her face pale in the gray light. She carried a paper bag and a folder wrapped in plastic. You didn't make it easy to find you, she said quietly. Wasn't trying to, Ethan replied. She dropped the bag beside him. Sandwiches, bottled water, a roll of gauze. You're officially a fugitive. They've sealed off the highways, but Holt hasn't sent a warrant to the feds yet. I think he's stalling. Maybe he's still got a conscience, Ethan said. Or maybe he's scared, Leah counted, kneeling beside him. I've been digging through the files you gave me, the ones on Volkov. Turns out the FBI had an open case on him 5 years ago. Money laundering, weapons, trafficking, human cargo, everything you said. Why didn't they take him down? They couldn't prove anything, she said, holding up the folder. Shell companies, fake names, offshore accounts. Every thread led to smoke. Ethan stared out at the rain beating against the warped windows. Then we pulled the thread harder. Leah looked at him, really looked, and saw what the war had left behind. Not anger, not vengeance. Just purpose. Ethan, she said softly, you can't keep doing this alone. He met her eyes. I'm not. I've got him. He nodded toward Ranger, who had already taken up guard by the door, alert and silent. Leah smiled faintly. Then I guess that makes 3 of us. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance somewhere back in town. The hunt had begun, but so had something else. Ethan leaned back against the wall, one hand resting on Ranger's shoulder, the other holding Leah's folder. Volkov built his empire in the dark, he said quietly. Time. We'd turned on the lights, and for the first time since he'd set foot in Greyhaven, Ethan felt the fog around him start to thin, not because the danger had passed, but because he finally had direction. Somewhere above the sound of the storm, he thought he heard Ranger's low growl, not fear, but recognition. The war was coming back to them, and this time, it would end here. The ocean was steel gray by morning, rolling under a sky the color of old bruises. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat on a crate in the abandoned boathouse, Ranger resting beside him, both watching the first light crawl across Greyhaven's shoreline. Every instinct told him the clock was ticking. Then he heard it, the soft hum of an engine outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. He reached for his sidearm, but the voice that came through the door made him pause. Easy, Ghost. You always were jumpy before coffee, Ethan exhaled. Slow. He knew that voice. When the door opened, 3 figures stepped through the fog. Reaper came first, tall, lean eyes like a scope sight. Hawk followed, headphones draped around his neck, a tablet tucked under one arm. Stone brought up the rear, broad as a wall, smelling faintly of gun oil and sarcasm. For a second, no one spoke. Then Reaper grinned. Damn, Ghost. You look worse than Fallujah. Ethan stood, the faintest smile ghosting across his face. You look the same, like bad decisions in body armor. They clasped forearms. Old habit. Old bond, the kind forged in sand, blood, and silence. Leah emerged from the shadows, startled by the sudden arrival. Who? Family, Ethan said simply. Then to his men, Dr. Leah Morgan. She's the only reason I'm not rotting in a cell right now. Stone gave her a nod. Then we owe you one. Dog Hawk's gaze drifted to the laptop she'd set on a crate, cables snaking across the floor. Nice setup. You running surveillance. Leah blinked, then caught on. Trying to advance developments. Got a private security network. Cameras all over the waterfront and half the town. I can't get past their firewalls. Hawk cracked his knuckles. You can't. I can. Within seconds, he was crouched beside her, fingers flying over the keyboard, muttering to himself in half-code and curse words. Let's see encrypted tunnel, remote shell, and Hawk. Someone tell corporate they should have updated their firmware. Ethan raised a brow. You in? Hawk grinned. Front doors open. Boss. Reaper leaned against a beam, scanning the room. So what's the mission, Ghost? You finally found a new war. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Leia then back at his men. Not a war, a cleanup. He spread a handful of photos across the table, grainy images Leah had printed from intercepted files. Charles Vance, real name Konstantin Volkov, using Greyhaven as a front for arms trafficking. We've got shipments moving through the port disguised as construction freighter. Ranger and I saw it firsthand. Stone whistled low. Volkov, that bastard still breathing. Thought Langley burned his trail years ago. FBI tried, Ethan said. Didn't have proof. Reaper straightened. So we get proof. Exactly, Ethan said. We hit the docks, pull visual evidence, and feed it to federal channels before Vance can bury it. By nightfall, the boathouse had transformed. Hawk set up a makeshift command station. Laptops, signal boosters, power inverters scavenged from Leah's clinic van. Reaper cleaned his rifle with a ritualist's patience. Stone prepped small demolition charges, nothing lethal, just enough to open locked doors. Leah worked side Hawk, calibrating a small body-mounted camera. Ranger sat perfectly still while she adjusted the strap around his neck. The camera was light, stabilized, designed to stream directly to Hawk's monitor. Okay, Leah said softly, scratching under Ranger's chin. You're the eyes tonight. Okay, stay close to Ethan. Ranger gave a quiet woof, like he understood every word. Ethan watched the exchange, then looked back at his men. We'll run recon only. No contact, no gunfire. We get eyes on the operation, record everything, and disappear before dawn. Reaper smirked. You always say that. It never ends quiet. Ethan half smiled. Then maybe this is the first time. The plan unfolded with military precision. Hawk tapped into the security grid, cycling through feeds from the waterfront. Most cameras showed nothing but fog and parked machinery until one screen flickered, revealing motion. There, Hawk said, zooming in, on the monitor. A row of trucks idled by the docks, engine slow and steady. Men in reflective vests moved in formation, too organized for construction crews. Behind them a ship loomed in the mist unmarked. Lights dimmed. Reaper leaned closer. That's not construction cargo. Hawk magnified the image, metal containers being lifted by crane. Stenciled numbers scraped off, the faint outline of cerulean letters still visible. Leah's breath caught. Those aren't supplies. Those are weapons crates. Ethan stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Volkov's running shipments through Greyhaven. Hawk switched feeds, showing another angle, and there he was, Charles Vance, standing near the pier, coat collar turned up, phone pressed to his ear. Behind him a familiar face, Dylan, his son, watching the operation like it was a late-night show. Reaper muttered, so the kid's in on it too. Apple. Treestone said flatly. Leah shook her head. They're moving that cargo now. By morning it'll be gone. Ethan's voice went quiet. Then we don't wait for morning. Hawk frowned. We're not geared for a full op, Ghost. We're not. Ethan agreed. We're scouts tonight. But once we know where those trucks are headed, Reaper cut in, finishing the thought. We bring the storm. The boathouse hummed with the sound of distant thunder and low static from Hawk's rig. Outside, the rain came harder, tapping against the roof like a ticking clock. Ranger sat at the door, restless, tail flicking, sensing the tension that filled the room. Ethan stood beside him, eyes locked on the glowing screens. The camera feed zoomed closer, a truck door closing, the faint glint of rifle barrels through the gap. Vance turned toward the camera, as if he could feel their gaze through the wire. And for a moment, it wasn't Greyhaven anymore. It was Fallujah, Kandahar, Mosul, all the ghosts of wars Ethan thought he'd buried. He whispered almost to himself, "Welcome back, Ghost." Ranger turned his head, waiting for the next order. Ethan took a breath, slow and steady. The calm before the mission. Let's move. The storm came in hard from the sea that night, the kind that makes the whole coastline hum with warning. Greyhaven's harbor was a black blur of waves and steel, the air electric with salt and thunder. Underneath the chaos, hidden beneath the city's crumbling veins, four shadows moved through the storm drains like ghosts. Ethan led the way, water up to his knees, flashlight dimmed to a faint pulse. Ranger stayed close at his side. First lick with rain, every movement silent and measured. Behind them, Reaper carried his suppressed rifle wrapped in oilcloth. Hawk kept his comms rig dry under a tarp, and Stone hefted a duffel bag of explosives like it was just another day at work. No one spoke. They didn't have to. Years of combat had carved a language of its own, a glance, a gesture, the rhythm of breathing. Above, the storm howled against the metal grates. Lightning flashed through cracks in the concrete ceiling, briefly illuminating their faces. Hard, focused, alive. 200 meters north, Hawk murmured through the mic. Voice low but steady. We hit the junction, then right. That'll put us beneath the docks. Ethan nodded. Copy that. Eyes open. They reached the end of the tunnel where an old service ladder led upward. Ethan pressed his ear to the hatch. Through the roar of the rain, he could hear engines idling, trucks, heavy ones, and the low thump of crates being unloaded. He looked down at Ranger. You ready, partner? Ranger's tail flicked once. Silent acknowledgement. Ethan pushed the hatch open an inch, peering through. The storm had swallowed the dockyard in darkness. Only the floodlights from the cranes cut through the rain, swinging like searchlights. Dozens of men in black raincoats were unloading cargo from a rusted fishing trawler with a name painted on the hull. Black Horizon. Reaper crouched beside him. You seeing this? Ethan handed him a small tablet. The live feed from Ranger's Colocam already recording. We get proof first, then we move. Leah's voice came faintly over comms from the safe house miles away. I've got your signal. You're live? Just be careful. Ethan. He almost smiled. Always am. They emerged from the drain one by one, melting into the shadows behind stacked containers. The rain did the rest, masking footsteps, drowning the sound of breathing. Ethan signaled with 2 fingers advance. Ranger patted ahead, camera catching every angle. Through the lens, Leo watched from a screen as the team closed in on the ship. The camera caught faces Dylan Vance shouting orders, and next to him a tall, silver-haired man in a tailored coat. Charles Vance, a.k.a. Konstantin Volkov. Reaper's voice came through. Got visual confirmation. Volkov in play, Ethan whispered. We end this tonight. Lightning split the sky and then everything went wrong. A light flared on the dock, brighter than the rest. One of the guards turned sharply, scanning with a flashlight. It landed on a single wet footprint near the crate line. Dog, the man muttered. Someone's here. He turned, gun raised. Ranger moved first, a blur of motion, jaws clamping onto the man's wrist before he could fire. The guard's scream was swallowed by thunder, but the noise was enough. Shouts erupted, searchlights swung. Alarms blared through the dockyard. Contact. Reaper hissed. Ethan raised his rifle. Go loud. The night exploded. Gunfire cracked through the storm, echoing against steel and water. Stone tossed a smoke grenade that burst into white fog, swallowing half the dock. Hawk jammed the comms frequency, cutting off their coordination. Ethan fired short, controlled bursts. 2 guards down. 3 more pinned behind a forklift. Ranger dashed between cover, dragging a wounded Hawk to safety after a bullet grazed his arm. Ranger's hit. Hawk shouted. Ethan turned just in time to see blood streaking down Ranger's flank, shallow, but enough to twist his gut. You're okay, buddy. Stay low. Through the smoke, he saw movement. Dylan Vance, sprinting toward the pier, clutching a pistol and a radio. Ethan chased him, boots slamming against the soaked wood. The storm had turned the world into chaos. Wind, rain, the crash of waves smashing against pylons. Lightning flared, outlining Dylan's face twisted in rage. You don't get it, Cole, Dylan shouted over the storm. This town was dying. We're just finishing the job. Ethan's voice was steady, deadly calm. You were selling it, piece by piece. Dylan fired. The bullet grazed Ethan's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He recovered fast, charging forward, tackling Dylan into a stack of ropes and crates. The 2 men slammed against the railing, fists in fury replacing words. Years of military precision met entitled rage-trained strikes against blind aggression. Ethan caught Dylan's wrist, twisted, and drove him backward into the railing. The dock creaked beneath their weight. Lightning flashed again. For a split second, Dylan's face looked almost human, afraid. Please, he started. Ethan's grip tightened. You kicked my dog. He drove a punch into Dylan's chest. The man stumbled, lost footing, and disappeared into the black water below. The sea swallowed him whole. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, rain pouring down his face like a baptism. The storm raged on, indifferent. Behind him, Reaper's voice crackled over the comms. We've got the footage. Everything. Weapons. Faces. Shipments. It's enough to bury Volkov. Ethan turned, limping back toward the team. Ranger met him halfway, tail wagging weakly despite the blood. Ethan knelt, resting a hand on his head. Good work, soldier. The thunder rolled out toward the horizon as the team retreated into the night, leaving behind a burning dockyard and a half-sunken ship. By dawn, the storm had passed. The town of Greyhaven woke to sirens and rumors, gunfire at the pier, explosions in the bay, and somewhere, deep in the wet woods overlooking the coast, Ethan Cole and his team stood silent around a small fire. Ranger rested at his side, stitched and bandaged, eyes steady on the horizon. Reaper broke the silence first. You think this'll end it? Ethan stared at the distant smoke curling over the harbor. No, he said quietly. This just started the real fight. The flames flickered, reflected in Ranger's dark eyes, the calm before whatever storm was coming next. Morning broke over Greyhaven in muted gray. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of salt and smoke. The town was quiet, the kind of silence that comes after something violent has been washed away but not yet forgotten. Ethan Cole stood outside the safe house, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea met the mist. Ranger sat beside him, bandaged but alert, tail thumping faintly in the dirt. The world felt fragile for the first time in years, like a house rebuilt on sand. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. A familiar voice crackled through the line, low, cold, deliberate. Mr. Cole, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Charles Vance, the man chuckled. So formal. You've been busy ruining my docks, killing my son, and stealing my property. Let's make it simple. Bring the video files to the construction site at Greyhaven Resort. Alone, Ethan's voice dropped into that tone he hadn't used since the war. And if I don't? A faint rustle came through the phone, then a woman's muffled cry. Leah Vance's tone turned silky. Then I start removing pieces until you remember what loyalty looks like. The line went dead. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. Rain began again, soft and steady, tracing down his face like sweat. Ranger growled low, sensing the shift, the quiet rage, the resolve. Ethan knelt, brushing the fur behind Ranger's ear. We're ending this. Tonight. The Greyhaven Resort project had been meant to symbolize renewal, steel beams and glass rising where forest once stood. But now it looked like something half-built and haunted. The main warehouse loomed at the center of the site, with windows glowing faintly in the fog. Ethan parked half a mile away and went the rest on foot. His movements were methodical, stripped of emotion, a soldier's walk. Ranger followed, silent as a shadow. Inside his jacket was a small hard drive fake, loaded with scrambled code and the tracker Echo team had planted. The real data was already safe, transmitted to the FBI's encrypted server 2 hours earlier. Stay low, Ethan whispered to Ranger as they reached the loading yard. On my signal. The warehouse doors creaked open as he approached. A dozen armed guards flanked the interior, rifles raised but not yet firing. At the far end of the room stood Charles Vance, tall, immaculate, the kind of man who believed the world owed him permanence. Leah was bound to a chair beside him, a bruise on her cheek, eyes defiant even through fear. Vance smiled when Ethan stepped into the light. You came alone, I must admit. I doubted your sense of loyalty extended this far. Ethan dropped the fake hard drive on the concrete floor. You let her go first. Vance's smile widened. Oh, Mr. Cole, you were a soldier, you should know. Leverage comes after the trade. Ethan said nothing. His eyes flicked once toward Leah, just enough for her to see it, to know. Then he raised his hand slowly, palms open. Fine, he said evenly. Take it. One of Vance's men stepped forward, picking up the drive and handing it to his boss. Vance examined it like a collector admiring a rare coin. You see, you could have made a fine employee, Mr. Cole. All that discipline, all that fire wasted on conscience. He turned toward his computer setup, inserting the drive. The moment he did, the warehouse lights flickered a brief, sharp pulse. Ranger had slipped in through a side vent, unseen, crouching in the shadows above the rafters. His camera transmitted everything back to Echo Team, miles away, who were already tracing the signal. Vance's screen lit up with meaningless static. What is this? He barked. Ethan's voice was low. Insurance. Then the lights cut out completely. A hiss of smoke filled the air, white and thick, pouring from a canister Ethan had rolled forward. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, confusion. Ethan moved through it like a phantom, disarming one man, dropping another with a single elbow strike. Ranger leaped from above, slamming into a guard that had raised his weapon toward Leah. The man went down screaming, his rifle skidding across the floor. Leah kicked the chair back, snapping the rope against a jagged edge. Ethan reached her in seconds, pulling her free. You okay? She nodded, breathless. You took your time, had to make an entrance. Across the smoke-filled room, Vance was backing toward the exit, firing wildly. You can't stop this, he shouted. Do you have any idea who I am? Ethan stepped through the haze, a dark silhouette, a man who forgot what fear feels like. Ranger growled beside him. Vance aimed for the dog, but before he could fire, a red dot appeared on his chest. Outside, on a rooftop half a mile away, Reaper whispered into his comm, target acquired. Vance froze. Then the warehouse filled with blue and red lights, sirens wailing, tires screeching. Federal agents swarmed in from every side. FBI, drop your weapon. Vance looked around, realization dawning too late. Ethan's decoy hard drive had broadcast a live signal straight to the bureau. Every word, every threat, every face recorded. He lowered his gun, sneering, You think this ends with me? There's always another man above. Ethan stepped forward, expression unreadable. Then I'll keep climbing. The agents coughed Vance, dragging him away as Leia leaned against a pillar. Shaking from adrenaline, Ranger limped to her side, pressing his head into her hand. Ethan stood there in the swirling lights, rain dripping through the broken roof. It was over, at least for now. Leia looked up at him. So what happens next? He gave a tired smile. We rebuilt one piece at a time. She laughed softly. The first real sound of peace in weeks. You're terrible at retirement. You know that. Ethan looked down at Ranger, who wagged his tail once. Yeah, he said quietly. We both are. Outside, dawn broke over Greyhaven, pale gold against the bruised sky. The echoes of the storm faded, replaced by the slow hum of a town beginning to breathe again. And as the FBI convoy rolled out, Ethan Cole watched the ocean beyond the ruins of the resort, hand resting on Ranger's neck, knowing one truth that had carried him through every battle: some wars end with silence, others end when justice finally speaks. The storm that had once haunted Greyhaven was gone. In its place, sunlight broke through the morning mist, scattering across the quiet harbor like a promise. For the first time in months, the news wasn't filled with fear. Breaking: the Vance Development Corporation has collapsed following a federal investigation. Authorities confirmed Charles Vance, also known as Konstantin Volkov, was the head of an international money laundering and smuggling network. Local officials, including Sheriff Holt, have been arrested on corruption charges. The voice of the reporter echoed faintly from the radio in Harbor Vet Clinic. Leia stood behind the counter, hands still trembling as she turned down the volume. The clinic, her clinic, was alive again. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the scent of antiseptic, the distant sound of gulls, all reminders that peace had a sound after all. Outside, a group of townspeople gathered near the door: fishermen, shopkeepers, old neighbors who had once lost faith. They were carrying lumber, paint, ropes, and buckets. Leia stepped outside, blinking against the light. What's all this? A burly man in a faded flannel shrugged. Heard you're reopening. Figured Greyhaven owed you some help. She smiled, not the polite kind she'd given for months, but a real one, born from relief. Then let's get to work. Down at the shoreline, Ethan Cole stood in worn jeans and a rolled-up shirt, hammering a plank into place on what would soon become the new pier. Ranger lay nearby in the sand, his bandaged leg fully healed, watching the waves with half-lidded eyes. The project wasn't a resort anymore. It was something smaller, quieter, a sanctuary. The townspeople had voted to turn the property into a community marine preserve. No investors, no glossy brochures, just a promise to protect what was left. Ethan drove the final nail into the post, wiped his brow, and looked out toward the horizon. The sea shimmered gold under the late afternoon sun. Leia approached, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You know, she said, handing him one, I never thought I'd see this place come back to life. He took a slow sip. Places like this don't die easy. They just wait for someone to remember them. She watched him for a moment. And what about you? Ethan, you're planning on remembering or disappearing again? He didn't answer right away. The waves rolled in, breaking gently at their feet. Ranger barked once, chasing after a gull and scattering sand. Ethan smiled. I came here looking for silence, he said finally. Thought maybe peace meant being alone. Leia tilted her head. And now, he looked out toward the sea. Now I think peace is when you stop running from the noise, when you find something worth standing still for. Leia's eyes softened. That sounds like something you should put on a wall, Ethan chuckled, setting his cup down. Funny you should say that. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, Ethan hung a new wooden sign above the clinic's door. The letters were hand-carved, simple and worn, but honest. Harbor Vet Clinic, where loyalty never dies. Ranger sat beside him, tail thumping lightly against the porch. Leia stepped out, resting her shoulder against the frame, watching him tighten the last bolt. Looks good, she said. Ethan smiled faintly. It's your place. Just making sure the signs stand straight this time. She looked at him for a long moment, then at Ranger. It's our place now. For a while, they just stood there, the sound of waves in the distance, the scent of salt and cedar, the town slowly coming alive again behind them. As dusk fell, Ethan walked down to the beach. The tide was low, the sand cool beneath his boots. Ranger bounded ahead, his coat shining in the orange glow of the sunset. He ran straight into the waves, barking at the foam, daring the ocean to chase him back. Ethan watched, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a soldier or a drifter, just a man standing on the edge of something new. He closed his eyes as the sea breeze brushed against his face, and somewhere inside, that old voice, the one that used to whisper orders, tactics, warnings, went quiet. In its place, a new one rose. I came here to escape the war, but this place taught me something I'd forgotten. Peace isn't silence, it's the moment you stop running. The last light of the sun faded behind the waves. Ranger came sprinting back up the beach, dripping wet, tail wagging furiously. Ethan crouched, laughing quietly as the dog barreled into him, knocking him backward into the sand. He ruffled Ranger's fur. Yeah, you win, buddy. The camera of life, if there had been one, would pull back then. The man, the dog, the sea, Greyhaven glowing behind them, reborn from ruin. The music swelled softly, strings and low brass, a melody that sounded like healing. And as Ranger took off running down the shoreline, chasing the dying sun, Ethan's voice lingered one last time, steady.com/certain. Some wars you fight to survive, others you fight to come home. The screen would fade to black. Only the sound of the waves remained endless, forgiving, alive.